Segment 1. Geologic Time. Before watching Geologic Time, think about this. Why do you think it is important to measure prehistoric periods of time?
Time. Human beings measure it in seconds, minutes, hours. We count days and years. From an individual human point of view, the most significant period of time is a lifetime. From our first breath to our last, we live on average 75 years. That's time on a human scale. Human history refers to much longer periods of time than just one individual's life. In fact, it sometimes refers to many human lifetimes. But these human-centered time scales are inadequate to describe the history of Earth. Our planet was formed 4.6 billion years ago. To describe and to organize events in its past, Earth scientists or geologists use what's known as geologic time. Geologic time deals with periods much longer than human lifespans. But how do geologists know what happened on Earth millions or billions of years ago? They study what's happening on our planet today. The process is taking place now. Volcanic activity, shifts in Earth's crust, and erosion from water and wind are the same processes that have been present throughout much of Earth's history. One example is the volcanic eruption off the coast of Iceland in 1963. Lava flowed for 1 full year. The result? A brand new island called Surtsey, created through the same processes that formed much of Earth's surface in the distant past. Geologists have 2 scales by which to measure geologic time. These are relative time and absolute time. Relative time deals with the sequencing of events, the order in which things happened. For instance, which came first? The woolly mammoth, the stegosaurus, or the trilobite? Relative time doesn't describe exactly when an event happened, but rather what came before it and what came after it. Relative dating provides a chronology. To determine the relative time of when an event happened or a particular organism lived, geologists study rocks. Earth's crust is made of many layers of rock. Usually the layers farthest from the surface are the oldest. The ones closest to the surface are the youngest. This is called the principle of superposition. Trapped inside many of the layers is evidence of organisms that existed at the time the rock was laid down, fossils. Scientists determine the relative age of an organism based on its position in the rock strata. That's relative time. Geologists also drill deep into Earth to take core samples of ancient rock layers. By analyzing the composition of thin slices of the cores, they can determine absolute time, or the actual age of the rock, and the organisms fossilized within it. They can establish absolute time by measuring the radioactive decay of certain chemical elements in rocks that break down or decay over time. Uranium is one example. It decays into lead. Scientists know the exact rate at which the decay occurs. By measuring the amount of uranium and the amount of lead, they can determine the age of the rock and the fossils within it. In this case, bacteria.
The fossil evidence in the most ancient rocks on Earth indicate that these types of organisms must have existed 3.7 billion years ago.
All living things contain a radioactive isotope known as carbon-14. Carbon-14 decays relatively quickly, so carbon dating generally is feasible only for organisms less than 50,000 years old. There is yet another way to establish absolute time. thanks to the glaciers that once covered much of the planet. As the glaciers advanced, they carved out huge depressions in the land. When the glaciers melted, the holes filled with water, creating lakes such as the Great Lakes of the Midwestern United States. Each year, a layer of sediment is deposited on the lake bottom. It is called a varve. The sediment deposited in summer is light-colored and coarse. Winter deposits are dark and fine-grained. Those differences make it easy to distinguish individual varves. Scientists count them to determine age.
Some of these tidal rock layers are just paper thin, and it's like each piece of paper is a story or page out of a diary telling what's happened a billion years ago.
Whether they're looking at varves or at fossils found in other sedimentary rocks, geologists are able to read the rocks and uncover the story of our planet. They translate geologic evidence into events and changes in Earth that happened millions, even billions of years ago. Revealing Earth's history makes digging in the dirt well worth the effort.
Now that you've seen geologic time, talk about this. What two scales do geologists use to measure time? How do rocks help geologists determine time periods?